Welcome to Music Theory Basics for Songwriters. When I got to a point after I really knew some basics, I got too into, like a lot of songwriters, using every different type of chord, so chord inversions and extensions, as I could. So that became my sound. Like every song had some funky groove to it because of the chords. And that's fine, but after a while I started to notice that I was running out of ideas and everyone expected a certain thing. And people weren't paying attention to my lyrics because the musicology was so interesting and perhaps challenging for some. So what I started working out was that the biggest songs of all time are all very much basic chords. So you need a really good understanding of the circle of fifths. Some people call it the circle of fifths and fourths. Doesn't matter what you call it. I still call it circle of fifths because where they talk about the fourths is with the flats. But if you go backwards, it's always the five. So each to their own. But what I discovered was using the very basics of a chord progression and an enhanced chord that'll spark that interest of all those funky chords, and then it'll resolve itself. A lot of artists are like using lots of crazy chords, which I love their sound. A lot of people that are really into music love the crazy musicology of it, and that's what they're looking for, and that's okay. You've got an audience there. Good luck in continuing to find all those new versions of chords to keep it interesting. If you can teach me some new ones, I'm always keen. But the important thing is actually understanding what you're using. So I would always say to songwriters, go back to the basics of the circle of fifths. And so what I talk about with my students is key chord scales. And what that is all the basic chords available in any key. So if we just look at the key of G to start with, this is the key that most people start writing in. I think that's true. I know with my students, they start writing with what are joked about as the zombie chords. So yeah, E minor, C, G, and D. And that's your pop formula right there. But everybody has heard it. An enhancement on one or two of the chords can make it go a long way. I like to use a version of D that is it's a seventh, but not your open D7. It's more like a C-shaped chord with the seventh added. So if you play C7, that's how I play the D, just slid up 2 frets. And those movable chord shapes are gold as songwriters to give you just that little bit of edge. So 1 or 2 little changes like that will just enhance that song. But you need to understand all the chords that are available. A lot of people don't even know what they are, so they keep going back to that formulaic zombie chord type thing. So every key has the same qualities. The gaps between the chords are tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. If you don't understand that information, go back. I've got lessons about key chord scales and in-depth things about the circle of fifths. So this sometimes you need to go back to those. So the other thing that never changes is the alphabet. The alphabet never changes. So the musical alphabet goes from A to G, back to A. So in the case of G, it's G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. The other thing that never changes is the chord types. These can be altered, but the basics are always major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, major. Now, you can go back and learn about all that. And there's a stickler in the diminished. A lot of people teach, forget about it. Just forget the diminished. But if you're looking for color in your songs, you can change your 7th degree, your diminished chord, to a minor flattened 7th. There are other versions like dominants they use in place. In this case, we're using the dominant minor. I believe you can use a version of the dominant major. So you can, and in the key of G, you can use an F sharp minor flattened 7th. Or alternative is using, you can use varying types of the D7 because basic music theory makes chords out of tonic triad when we're not talking about inversions yet. So your 1, your 3 and your 5. So let's just look at D. D major is D, F sharp and A. That's your D major chord. Your F sharp diminished, let's start one in, just so that F sharp, A, B, C. So there's one note difference between these, and if you add the 7th to D, you get a C note. So if you put it over here, you got the C, that makes it D7. Okay, so that's virtually the F sharp diminished chord. You've just added a D to it. So that'll always work in the place of the diminished, just to give a bit of colour. So that's a resolution chord, just like the D. And as in country music, they use that all the time, going to that 7th and hanging on it for that resolution. Oh, I've gone home. It's like tension, release. The one thing I'll keep coming back to is know these basics. Go back and look at the circle of fifths and the key chord scale lessons. These will, if you can't find them, you can buy a flexi video off me. That means you just buy a video clip like this one and you can go back to it and you can watch it as many times as you need. The thing about the basics of music theory is you're given a foundation piece of knowledge and you're told to believe it. Later on you can fiddle with it, but you go for that. But the thing is some people take a wee while to really get to grips with what this information is and how to use it. If you need to do it 30 times, that's fine. Continue. My advice is to write it out a lot and you'll get to grips with this. Understanding that stuff will take you from, like, where I began as a songwriter. I sat trying to learn guitar and I went through this book, and I won't say who the book was by because it's a very respected guitar tutor who bought lots of books, and lots of people learned that way. My mind didn't work the same way as those people. So in a fit of rage and frustration, I threw the book across my mother's shed and it flapped open like a bird, and I could see these chord charts with just the chord boxes with the dots as to where your fingers went. I went, I understand that. Just while it's flying in the air, I could understand it. I went, oh, I can play all those. And so I learned guitar that way. And I took the information and stuck chords together that sounded good and wrote songs around those. And every time I learnt a new chord, I'd write a song around it, which I didn't realize at the time. What I was doing was getting familiar with the language of songwriting. So actually, lyrically, I was writing lots of songs. If you're doing the songwriting course and you really want to get good, number one thing I'll say to you is write lots of songs, hundreds. So in a year, if you've written 100 songs, people are always going, am I writing too much? Like, there's no such thing. Are you finishing your songs? That would be the question I'd throw back to you. Are you finishing all those songs? If yes, we'll continue writing more and then go into details of the rules of songwriting that people talk about. You've probably worked out most of those rules and you've actually completed them and you're doing them. Maybe you're just learning about words that go with those things so you can talk to collaborators, songwriters you're working with about intervals. So tone, semitone, those are intervals between chords, and then there's larger intervals, so you get G to C, and you talk about what those sort of intervals are. You'll get to know that language later. If you actually work through some things, you'll start doing some things that other songwriters aren't. Not one of my favourite artists would be Kurt Cobain, but I'm always teaching stuff about things he's used in my classes because did he know these rules? I don't think he knew really any of them. But that's part of what made him good, was that he could break those rules without flinching. But he also used a lot of those rules in ways that I take my hat off to him. It's not my sound, but he wrote some really clever songs and inspired a generation. And so I would say go and write your 100 songs. If you've got your 100 songs, you have grown some skills that will craft your sound and your style forever. You can grow and change from that. So if you want, so 2 tips I would give you: write 100 songs. Just write and write and write and write. That could mean pages. We talk about pages, or free flow writing, creative writing, free writing. There's lots of things they call it. Do that. Write something every day. Maybe it's songs. Maybe you're someone who can complete songs. Complete them. If you're not completing your songs, go back and work on them. You might even find there's one that'll plague you for years and years and years. Number 2 is a bit of music theory. But I would say go and write your songs first. Get your 100 songs. After that, come and make sure you understand the basics. So the basics, I mean the circle of fifths and how it is all formed. So understanding what makes a chord, your 1, 3, 5. Intervals like your tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. What are major and minor chords in which degree? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. 8 is to some people optional. I think the octave is thoroughly important personally. But you'll find out why if you do the course on the circle of fifths and the key chord scale. If you haven't completed those songs, do try again. So you might find your learning curve is in the songs that plague you. And what I mean by that is I had one that plagued me from, I think I wrote it about 1995 or 6, I think. And the little song, I knew there was a hit in there. And every time I played it live with my blind vision, as I called it, I knew it was already a hit. I knew it was a song. I knew it was something worthwhile. Don't think all the audiences heard that. But when I got to the bridge, they knew that bit of the song was really good. And that most people would have said that was all that was good about the song. I knew there was something in the other bits. And until I put it in the the group we call our Songwriters Circle. We do shows and songwriting rounds. And during one of the recent lockdowns, we were firing things around in a Facebook Messenger feed. And two songwriters I absolutely respect started throwing their weight in. and it was one and two completely different guys. One went, oh, I love this theme, and he threw words around, and he's one of my favourite songwriters, Mr. Phil Dublé. Check him out. And he was throwing words around, and I came up with all these other parts, putting his words with mine. And then another friend of mine who's a drummer, but an amazing songwriter, guitarist, singer, Steve Cornane, check him out too. And the many bands he's been in over the years. And he didn't really fire words around. He took what was there and analysed it in a way that I'd never really looked at it. He said, look at the song and its details, and he structured the thing and said, you're really onto something here. Tell me the rest of that story. And that's what happened. Was I told the rest of the story that I believed in the beginning, but I hadn't told the world the story and why it was important. And then I could write it. I was trying to write it in that moment, where now I could be the grizzled old man saying how cool we were. And he was like, things like, you're talking about drinking cocktails in the sun. Where did you do it? Is there a cool bar? Name drop the bar. You use, things like that pinpoint the place, the town, or make it anybody's hometown or anybody's local bar. What that bar was like, and those things, rather than expecting everybody to understand your story that you're trying to tell, because you've got a picture painted in your head. Our job as songwriters is to paint that picture on the canvas, on the paper. Cool. So, thank you for listening to this one. Any questions, throw them in the chat below. Feel free to email me anytime with questions. Show me some of your songs. I'm really keen to connect with you as songwriters and work with you on a few things. Book a one-on-one Zoom with me, and we can go through some of your songs individually. We can do songwriting challenges. I've got a songwriting book out there called Song Poets Corner. I'm writing a follow-up to that, which I don't think will be called Song Poets Corner 2, because it's taken a different turn, which I'm really excited about. So I don't know how long away that book is, but if you find two songwriting books by Jae Bedford, you've found the second one. And I hope that'll help inspire you too. There are lots of other resources out there, but I'll say mine first. There's some amazing songwriting resources. Go and have a look for them. The one thing I'd say, and why I'd recommend finding a tutor if you really want to grow as a songwriter, is, yes, there's stuff on YouTube. I learn a lot from YouTube, but I know some details already. Some people finding information and finding the right piece of information for the right time, you might spend more time actually searching for the information than looking at the information and using the information practically or theoretically. You will, with a tutor, we can stop and analyze your lyrics and say whatever's good about them and what to advance on. I try to veer on the positive side. We can look at how you rhyme, whether you care about rhyming, and maybe whether you should or shouldn't. I think people should have both crafts and be able to write a song with no rhymes and make sure it flows. There are lots of ways to do that. So YouTube's amazing if you've written your 100 songs. If you haven't written your 100 songs, we can work through some of those with you. So our courses, songwriting courses, and our music theory courses, our guitar courses, piano, bass, singing, all of those courses You can start at a beginner's level or an advanced level. Yes, if you're intermediate or advanced, I will probably go back to a few things that if I feel like you're not gathering certain information. Let's talk that through. We can talk it through 100 different ways. If you're like, I hate music theory, it's probably how it was taught to you, for you. Nothing wrong, not saying anything wrong with your tutor that taught you it before, but I like to teach people how it works for them. There are so many ways to do this. One of our next videos will talk about how to use the circle of fifths in its long written form, or the portrait view as I call it, but there's also a wheel. If you Google the circle of fifths, people go back to the wheel all the time and use it as I thought it was just a reference, but lately I've been shown new ways of using it, which I now teach to some of my kids that are like not sure. So I've spent years teaching primary school kids and intermediate age kids, and now high school young adults, and as well as adults. But I find because I've taught music theory to little kids, that translates for me to be able to teach you in the way you need to learn. So don't hesitate to say, can you try that again if you're on a Zoom call with me? And we'll try it lots of different ways, because I've seen a million different ways to do all this now, and I'm always researching other ways if I see something new. So, all right, talk to me in the comments, email me. Let's get together on a Zoom if you want to pay for some individual tuition on your songs. Cool. See you in the chat. Ta-da.